if, well, thank you for that. Uh, if this is too much like work, people are going to, you know, there's a saying, you eat the big frog first. Do you know what that means? You've got all these things you can do in the daytime, and you always put off that one thing till the end because that's the ugly frog. You just want to, you just keep putting it off, putting it off, putting it off, and then, I'll do it tomorrow. And then you put it off, it never gets done. Okay, so there's a saying, just eat the big frog first, get it out of the way, then everything else is easy, okay? If you get up in the morning and you're like, oh, I've got to go to work, you're going to dread, and every opportunity you get to get out of there, you're going to get out of there, whatever. So get the big frog first, And so lead gen in the morning, get it out of the way. Nobody really loves it. But if you're lead genning in an area that you like, we've had people that have come in that scared of doors, scared of phones, love body art, tattoos. Well, how about we hook you up with a tattoo group and set up a booth or sponsor an event they have, and that puts you in a conversation with somebody who has similar interests with you, and that's fun. Then it no longer seems like work, okay? And doing that kind of stuff is, we've had people that like to restore old cars. Well, I think 90% of his business comes from somebody from his Restore Old Cars group, If we can put you in a place you're comfortable to talk about real estate and then give you a good elevator speech to start that conversation, then that's kind of the goal, Linda comes from education. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Comes from education. I was at RE/MAX and I was trying to recruit her, and I was trying to tell her how much money she could make and all the neat things about RE/MAX. Couldn't have been farther from her interest. She never came over. Yeah, she never came over. I did give her a lunch in Denver, but other than that, it was when she comes in here with Melanie, it was never about, I want to take my business to the next level. It was, I'm an educator at heart and I'd like to help, And that's kind of what this place is about. Is like everybody, we all have our strong suits and we all have those things we avoid. I really hate being recorded, because when I'm recorded, then I have to stick to some type of schedule, and I don't have any type of schedule. What I wanted to talk about today is they were making a Halloween month of scary training. And so I go, well, right now negotiating seems to be fairly scary out there, so let's do a negotiations class on scary stuff. And then my world is dealing with the scary stuff, and when conversations go sideways and all that kind of stuff, and putting them back together and all that. And I started a nice little list of, oh, this would be good to talk about, this would be good to talk about. Darn if I can find that list. So we're going to talk about scary things. Purchase contract. I'm actually, we weren't going to talk about scary things. What could it mean? Is kind of what the title was. What could it mean? If I could get every one of our agents to think when they're writing, we're always talking about when you write an addendum, understand that you're in the middle of the transaction and things make perfectly good sense to you, but somebody that is reviewing it for a court case or for a closing has absolutely no clue what you're talking about, okay? And so things like, and these are regular, personal property shall be included as discussed on Saturday night. Well, unless you have a recording of that conversation on Saturday night, that means nothing, okay? And so you need to take the next step on, what could that mean? We have last week, we had an addendum that was written, and it said personal property, included personal property shall be refrigerator, and freezer in garage. Okay? And that was sent over, it was accepted, and the transaction closed, and the buyer got over there, and there was this little tiny freezer in the garage, and the refrigerator was gone. And so we bring it up to Berkshire Hathaway, and they're good friends of mine. I'm going, dude, the refrigerator wasn't there. And he goes, well, there wasn't a refrigerator in the garage. And I go, no, it was refrigerator and the freezer in the garage. He goes, oh, they said that they thought that you were talking like you had seen a refrigerator in the garage. He goes, why didn't you put a comma? That would have made all the difference in the world. Okay, so what else could it mean? Refrigerator and freezer in garage, or the refrigerator and the freezer in the garage would have cleared it up. Or better yet, say refrigerator, hot point, serial number, ... which is really what you should be doing, okay? Then you always add, included at no additional value. Why? Yeah. Linda's going, ooh, 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 ooh. Why do you want to put it no additional value?
And no warranty in life.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about that in a second too. You want to put no additional value because a lender doesn't want a loan on 30 years on a refrigerator that might have 2 years left on it, okay? And so they're going to want to separate the value out. If it's going to be included in this whole thing, they're going to base their loan amount on the value of the house minus the refrigerator. So they're just loaning on something that's going to have a life of 30 years, okay? Well, in order to do that, you're going to have to assess the value of that refrigerator. And the appraiser is not a refrigerator estimator. And so they always put in there, these are transferred for convenience of buyer and seller at no additional value. Then it puts 0 on there and it takes it away from that whole loan qualifying process, okay? So when, what else could it mean? I'm trying to get people just to look at their contracts and say, what else could it mean? Not, I'm in the middle of this transaction and it makes sense to me, but somebody not in the transaction, what else could it mean? And I think just that one little step will probably, clean up things. We as real estate licensees are allowed to what? Fill in the blanks of a pre-approved state form, right? If you stick to this form, you never have to ask, what else could it mean? Because all the questions are answered. There are some nice little hidden things in here you might not be aware of. The attorneys that wrote this are attorneys, and usually that means they want the upper hand in their next court case, so they put a few land bombs in here. And I've talked to all of them. There's a lot of shalls and mays, okay? Shalls and mays have an implied shall not or may not that go along with it, okay? So when it says, a buyer can cancel and the broker may release to buyer, it doesn't say I have to release to buyer. It says I may release to buyer, okay? And so if I'm defending our client, I'm going to make darn sure they realize their money's going to be gone or whatever. What does non-refundable earnest money mean to you? What does non-refundable earnest money mean to you?
You don't get any of it back if you don't perform by a certain date or if you don't.
Okay. That is the intention. What else could it mean? Okay. What about?
Once you read that, you better be aware that when it says non-refundable, that means non-refundable. However, always that independent. However, I look at it as another opportunity to negotiate. I don't want my buyer to lose their
Not COVID. Yeah, earnest money is not refundable. Okay. What if the seller defaults? What if the seller gets hit by a car? So earnest money not refundable under any circumstances to buyer isn't the case, is it? So a more precise would be earnest money is non-refundable to buyer upon seller performance and a successful closing. Or, I mean, you can put things in there to add to it, but sure is faster to put earnest money non-refundable. Okay? And then we get into the what ifs. The other part of my job, when I'm not wearing the Broker Dave hat, by any chance, any of you go to the party here the other night? Yeah. Okay. Notice I wear a sweater vest today.
I noticed there was lots of Broker Daves there.
Yeah. Apparently, I was the costume victim, and because of that, I wore a darn sweater vest today just to prove to them I do wear them. Seriously, I don't know. Okay, I spent a great deal of time here, obviously. I spent a great deal more time talking on the phone. Some of our agents show up late. And then I talked, no. But the other part of my life is I do forensic audits of real estate transactions for court battles. And when that happens, what I get to do is scope what a real estate agent did in a transaction that ended up into court. I get to look at the emails, text messages, the contracts they wrote, the contracts that were in position, the rule books of the Division of Real Estate, the Code of Ethics, common law, regular law, anything, and just track what a real estate agent does and answer the question, did a member of the public get the services which should reasonably be expected by a member of public when working with a professional? Okay? And so all of these little things, well, it could have meant that, and it could have meant that, are going to turn into a paragraph for my report that goes to court, and it could have been clearer, and Code of Ethics says we have the obligation to write things in clear and understandable language. Okay, well, what they wrote is clear, but did everybody understand it? And if not everybody understood it, is the contract binding? Was there a true meeting of the minds? And as soon as we make whether or not a contract is questionable, that puts it into a whole different ballgame in court, okay? So I just highlighted a couple of things on the purchase contract, and y'all are familiar with this, so I'm just gonna hit a couple of them and not pass out copies. But do you have a conversation with your buyer about legal names? Do you hit auto print when you're filling in or do auto form fill from a listing when you're writing an offer on it, and then notice that they are purchasing the house from really nice people, which is what an agent put under a buyer name or seller name on the listing. I see them all the time, Melanie, I'm not joking. I mean, people aren't even reading the contracts they are printing and sending to their people. And so when somebody, you know, on the MLS, I don't want to give everybody my client's name, so I put on file. These come across purchasing from seller on file. It's just an auto-fill thing, right? The names are a real issue, especially if you're going to go to court. And I can't sue John Smith, the seller of this house, if John Smith signed a contract on behalf of really nice people on file, okay? Can't even get a good PR from really nice people. I talked about included items and excluded items. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is there anything specifically in the house that's not normally included in the property you would like to ask the seller to leave? Already included are, and here's the paragraph. And that's extensive. It didn't used to be nearly as long as it is right now. And there's a lot of things that are automatically included, may not even be in the house. You may as well exclude them right, you know? Because the listing agent also is not necessarily going through his forms, and it may not have a solar system, but they've got it included, okay? So you might want to move some of those out. Excluded items. On the same stand, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is there anything you specifically want me to make sure the sellers take with them before they leave? You know, that old pile of wood in the backyard that's infested with termites, that 50-gallon drum that's got some liquid in it that we have no idea what it is. Do we want to make sure they take it with them, okay? What does broom clean and free of debris and personal belongings mean?
And that means anything not attached to the property needs to be gone. And you can't have like a garage full of, you know, glass balls and leaves, in my opinion. And I have conversations with my buyers all the time about what's reasonable. This isn't a trust, and the family's never stepping foot on that. Are they okay with that? Or if not, because their wishes dictate my narrative with the listing agent. And on a house I just closed on at Brighton, the very corner of Murray, on the other side of the street, it was in the trust. The seller's phone pre-picked on by name. And I said to the listing agent, we're here for the walkthrough. Here's pictures of what is still around. He took care of it himself to satisfy my buyer and not have to disturb the seller again. And that was his right to do so, that's his agency. And then we met in the middle on it, but it was a conversation about what our expectations were. And then they rose to the challenge, and then he followed up, they put things on the curb, you know, for the sign on. And then he followed up and said, are they gone? I know people were coming to get them, are they gone? And so we just talked through and confirmed, and my buyers are happy, and the listing agent went above and beyond on that one, but I had gone above and beyond in other ways to get us to the closing table. And I felt like our agency was well represented for our brooms swept clean and to make sure.
Well, you know, and that's, okay, let's just a little sidetrack here. What is agency? What are the duties of agency?
Character, confidentiality, loyalty, I don't know, any other reasons as required by law. You're acting in your behalf.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull out some court cases here that are just, you know, again, just, you've got the duty of loyalty, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care and diligence. Part of the reasonable care and diligence is to have a damn communication and pick up the phone and call the other side. It annoys me to no end getting blind offers sent over to me without even so much as a, hey, is it still available? Do you have multiple offers? Are you seller willing to, you know, whatever. Now that doesn't make it binding, that makes it communication. And the communication, generally speaking, that you're talking in text, emails, and voice will allow you to construct a contract that may be enforceable in court. Notice how I threw in the may be enforceable in court? may and shall, okay, may be enforceable in court. Buyers would like the seller to renew the house, rebuild it to brand new, so they never have a problem with it, okay? And so when you get a due diligence request, and it literally is the Christmas list that they're sending to Santa Claus, when you were a kid and you sent that Christmas list to Santa Claus, did you expect everything on that list? No, but the important things, I wanted that truck and I wanted the bike and I wanted, whatever. And the underwear and the socks and all that stuff that my mom told me to write on that list, I really don't care about it. But when you send that list over in writing on an addendum and a lender looks at it and the next addendum says, no, we're not going to give you items 1 through 25, but we will give you 1, 5, and 9, which are your important things and you're comfortable with. The lender literally looks at it and goes, they asked for 25 things and they're only getting 3. There's 22 things. Do I really want to loan money on this house? Okay. And so if you have the conversation with the agent, here's my Christmas list, and these things are really important, and you work it out. So when you write that diligence request addendum, you can put the things that are acceptable. Now your lender is saying, oh, they asked for 3 things and they're getting them done, And that's where people are missing it. A, have a conversation. B, communicate and work out the bugs, but that's not binding. And then make sure what is written is enforceable in the contract in language that can be, and what else could it mean? And that literally is a binding contract. I love giving people a hard time. Just say it. Yes, ma'am.
I find it saves time the minute you, and we will, if we have a buyer and we contact the seller's agent. Once you get that seller's agent on the phone, ask the question, how else did you communicate? Because I'm gonna know up front, is it gonna be difficult? At that moment, because once they tell me how they communicate, right? I either do it in email or how late can I call you? If you set those expectations up for yourself as an agent when negotiating with the other side,
Which is one of my go-to questions in deposition, Linda, when I get to, okay, so I'm doing a court thing and these agents are being accused of whatever, and then we take their statement, we bring them in for deposition, they're under oath. We get to sit there and dogpile questions out. That's one of my questions is, how long have you been doing this? What's your preferred method of? How long has Linda been doing this? And what's her preferred? Well, I don't know. Well, does she always call you back? Does she return text messages? Is she slow on returning text messages? And I've actually had people in court say, yeah, they ought to come into the 21st century and learn how to use the devices that they're packing around with them. And it's almost like, if you're not getting return text, if there's still lingering questions, how about try a different type of communication and see if that worked? Pick up the phone, okay? But there are a lot of people that just flat out don't want to pick up the phone. And yeah, it's frustrating. I do have that conversation at the very beginning. I'm from old school. Linda's not nearly in that group. No, but I will tell you, I got into real estate before computers, before you could auto print anything. We had to actually handwrite, press hard, going through 5 copies. The goldenrod is yours. You could never see what was written on it, but that was your copy. I mean, that's what it was. But we had to communicate. The other part of this was, because it was such a pain to have a written document and then run for signatures and go someplace else for signatures and then deliver it back to the first one, you wanted to get it right the first time. And so there were some conversations that took place, What does a win look like to your sellers? Where are they going? When do they want to be there? What are you doing? I mean, I'm going to be digging those questions out, not because I'm trying to breach fiduciary duty for you, but I want to write a dang contract that's acceptable. And if you say they need to stay in here until at least Christmas, when I'm writing the offer with my buyer, you know, we might be able to get this price if we give them something. They indicated that they'd like to stay till Christmas. Do you have a problem giving them until, and we can build a contract that's acceptable, okay? And it's not trying to dig your people for information. Another problem I'm having, what else could it mean? There's a line up here on purchase price that said the purchase price for the property is blank. And then there's the breakdown, and the last one is purchase price of the property. Those two numbers should be darn close to the same thing. You know, just should be pretty darn close, you know. I see those all over the place. You know, they're sometimes not filled out, sometimes they are filled out but different, sometimes the math doesn't add up, you know. Well, yeah, but, you know, yeah, yeah. And the sellers accepted it like that. Yeah, I mean, it's just, the thing that I'm trying to get at is if you ask the question, what else could it mean? It's going to make you look more professional than your busy schedule forces you to look. I know we're busy, and I know things miss through and on all that kind of stuff. But man, you need to, at some point in time, you're going to end up in court and you're going to go, yeah, that was dumb, wasn't it? And yeah, it was. And it just cost your people $70,000 or whatever. Possession. What is the acceptable time to allow the seller to stay in a property after closing? What seems to be common out here right now?
Well, I thought a lender didn't allow more than 60 days.
Okay.
I think I thought it was 72 when you rent it out, 72 hours for the lease out.
Anybody else want to guess?
Yeah, right? I put a lease back in with, if it's more than 72.
Yeah.
You need permission for a lender to do it after a certain amount of time, but what's normal out here?
I'm doing ad reporting most of the time.
Most of the
Ad
time.
reporting.
Okay.
Or, you know, we'll get it.
Okay. And you,
Actually is,
and are you filling out a lease agreement for that weekend?
but something could happen.
I know.
Any contracted rental of the property prior to or after closing between buyer and seller, quote, shall be by separate written agreement. In the contract. If you don't attach that written agreement, you've breached fiduciary duty, you've put buyer and seller at risk for that fire that probably will never happen, and you've made a contract that you know contains false information. And if I were doing an audit of what you were doing, that's a license getter.
So if it's
That's creating a false device.
reporting, it needs to be an addendum, a fine, a addendum, whatever.
Yeah, there has to be some type of a lease agreement agreed to by both parties.
So I'm out of compliance right now on one because we gave 14 days, but I read the addendum, the lease back addendum, and it says that the buyer has to have a key at reporting, right? Like they own the house, they're supposed to have a key.
Sure.
I have not got them the key yet, right? They haven't occupied the property, they haven't taken possession, but on the back of my mind, like I need to drive to Ogden, like now, to get it out of the Supra because they're supposed to have reasonable access. They can access it with 24 hours notice.
Well, yeah, owners need access for emergencies to the properties they own. You also have put yourself in a position, and this is just the technicalities of it, it also says in here, seller and buyer shall each be responsible for any insurance coverage each party deems necessary for the property, including any personal property or belongings. The provisions of this section shall survive closing. It burns down over the weekend. You've got a buyer that just took possession. He's got a binder for an owner-occupied policy. He's occupying it, but he doesn't own it. That's an argument for the insurance company to deny that claim. You've also got a seller that has an owner-occupied policy that owns it but does not possess it. there's two insurance companies that basically say, nope, you breached.
Okay, so what's happening now? How do we protect ourselves there? Because these lease back.
Have both buyer and seller maintain the coverage, and then at least you've got two insurance companies. Okay, and if you have two insurance companies, sometimes they will split it in the event of a damage. I don't worry about, I use as an example that fire that never happens. More commonly, we're having broken pipes happen almost every week in houses.
Or a tree that falls over and smashes the back deck.
Or they took their washing machine and that hose is leaking and it collapsed the downstairs basement. You know, I mean, that stuff's happening. And okay, the warranty company is not going to do it. They're going to consider it pre-existing. And so the people go back and file a claim. They just took out their new policy and the insurance company's going, pre-existing. Then you go over to the other side and they're going, I'm not going to get a ding on my insurance company. And let's all attorney up. Huh? Yeah, no, you bought it as is, where is, you know?
But that is the risk that people are taking. It's just making sure that everything.
And if people are taking that risk with full knowledge of that risk, then you are protected. I would have them sign something. I've explained to you the risks. Sign here. Because right now, we go to court. Melanie never told me that.
What would that look like really? Because we've got the lease back in that does have language about insurance and talks about rights for access.
I would be happy with an email. Hey, Melanie, like we talked, you understand there are risks in taking possession of the property without a lease agreement and the insurance coverage and all that kind of stuff. You and the seller decided to do it. That's fine if you want to.
Hang on, your point right there when you just said you decide to take possession of the property without a lease agreement, there is a lease agreement. Do I still need to?
Well,
have
lease
one?
agreement is going to dictate the terms of the rental.
Yes,
okay.
it does. So if I'm using that addendum, lease back, that's going to protect.
Yeah.
And it's going to.
And that is the separate lease agreement or a separate document that they're talking about here.
And it's like, if it's more than a recording, that should be in place.
Yeah, any. Compensation, I'm done beating compensation up, but dang. It's either in the purchase contract that you are getting paid, or you have a different document somewhere that says you are getting paid, or a combination of both up to the amount on your buyer-broker agreement. Okay?
And it's been working, thank you.
But zero on this before you get some other document. When you have a buyer-broker agreement that says that you are going to do this work for the buyer, you are literally guaranteeing that you are required by law to do the work without the safety net of being paid for it. Okay, you need it someplace. And so it's either in here or it's there. Very briefly here, when your confirmation of agency, it says that this is a confirmation of a prior written agreement. You can't be doing the buyer-broker agreement the next day when I yell at you. You know, this is a confirmation of a prior agreement to writing this. And if you happen to be writing it on an offer in the house, in our office, you know it's going to say seller both, buyer both. Not seller, seller, buyer, buyer. That is like chalkboard scraping to me. And I'm telling you what. Okay, the listing agent is Melanie. Linda writes an offer on it. She represents the buyer, you represent the seller. Who do I represent? I'm the broker.
Yes.
So how are you going to fill this out? It says seller's agent, Linda.
It's going to be both, if it's a limited agency.
So these are going to say seller both, buyer both. Seller, seller, buyer, buyer is probably the most common down here, and it puts me in dual agency, which is not cool in Utah. Okay, so there's that one.
So, but here's the thing, we are still having to sign a limited agency with the knowledge
Yeah.
that it's AW Select on both sides. But on that.
But that's a confirmation of limited agency. You're confirming it. This is an offer. Yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be that one is designated, seller designated to help the buyer?
Mhm.
there's no us.
I'm the hot seat guy.
Yeah, we're there's no us.
Yeah. I've talked about this ad nauseum. Tell me what warranties survive closing. Seller warranties that survive closing.
Yes, there are warranties, and anything that's contained in the document, right? If it's in the contract, it should ask for it.
You're the newest. Are there any seller warranties?
I was gonna say,
How much do you guys read this?
it's just how it comes to taxes.
Buyer acknowledges and agrees that in reference to the physical condition of the property, A, buyer is purchasing the property in its as-is condition without express or implied warranties of any kind. B, buyer shall have during buyer's due diligence, as referenced in section 8.1, an opportunity to complete, inspect, and evaluate the condition of the property. And C, if based on the due diligence, buyer elects to proceed with the property, buyer is relying wholly on buyer's own judgment and that of any contractors and inspectors engaged by buyer to review, evaluate, and inspect the property, the provisions shall survive closing. There are no warranties from seller to buyer, period. Okay?
Unless it's written in there expressly.
Yeah, okay, we've got one right now. Welcome to my weekend. On Thursday, Jeremy Martin called me up and said, this guy's being a pain. He apparently went over there and made an offer on the house, did an inspection, noticed there was a 6-inch gap in the sewer line. Okay? 6-inch gap, sewer line. All the sewage was jumping into the next pipe. Okay? They told the sellers they wanted that fixed. Sellers came back, and on the contract, the sellers came back and said that that line had been replaced in the last year. They would exercise the warranty coverage and transfer said warranty coverage to buyer, okay? Which they did, okay? Repair of that line was scheduled for 2 weeks after closing, okay? Contractor did not show up and made several months of excuses and then closed his company and went banco, okay? They took plumber guy to small claims court and won, but that judgment is worth nothing because he bancoed. The gap is now 12 inches. They would like us to force the seller to fix it. Do I have anything?
No.
So I'm supposed to tell our client, sorry, Charlie, it's 10 grand you weren't expecting. Yeah. It wasn't it, but what could it mean? It could mean the seller could have said, yes, I take responsibility for that repair, but I'm going to try to get it on the warranty coverage. And instead, they just passed it over the warranty coverage, and our agent said, no problem. Okay? We're going to end up in court on that one. Again, there is no warranties that survive closing. What's that? If somebody would have wanted to pony it up, apparently the way, and this is going to drive the recording nuts, but apparently when they are repairing the sewer pipe, they knew it was wrong, and apparently there's a procedure where they actually shove a new kind of different pipe in there, and it cuts off the broken part, and then you've got a new one in there. And they did that, but when they were shoving it in, it actually separated. There's like about a 6 to 7 foot gap from the house to where that pipe started. So they shoved all that stuff down and created that gap. They paid $10,000 for that fix, okay? The 6 feet that is from the house to that pipe needs to be replaced now. The bid is $12,000. I'm like going, how did you do 60-something feet from here down to there for 10, but from here to here is 12. He said, that's the reason is they slid this pipe in there and they didn't have to break up the driveway. That 6 feet, we now have digging, flat work, the cost of cement replacement and all that kind of stuff. And so I told Jeremy, find some of your best contractors and find out how cheap you can get it, because we be negotiating at this point in time, okay? We actually have an email to our agent that says, if they don't do it, we want to cancel. And our agent said, no problem, they're going to do it. Here comes the document. So we're exposed. What's a walkthrough inspection?
Really important.
Huh?
Really important.
It's really important. What if I just can't get there? I just heard you say a minute ago, Melanie, that you sometimes take your phone out and do a video walkthrough and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
And within 7 days of closing, right, I'm gonna show up at the property with my clients to ensure that the things we asked for are complete.
what if they can't make it?
If the buyers can make it, oh, I'll FaceTime. And I say this is really important, I've never had a client not make it.
Okay. What if they can't?
I would video it.
And what if you can't?
I would have another agent video it. We call Dave.
Yeah. At the end of the day, failure to conduct a walkthrough inspection does not take away the buyer's right to receive the property as represented. Okay, so it's still, they still have the teeth of the contract. The walkthrough inspection, to me, especially when you're videoing it, is to document that condition. So any changes, and especially if there's that unwritten lease 72-hour agreement, because that seems to be when everything's happening, is those 72 hours when ceilings are collapsing and things are going out. If you do the walkthrough inspection, you can say at this point in time, here's the video, it was working. Here's when we moved in, it wasn't. You know, now we know when the problem is. Next thing I'm going to scoot to, and then I'm going to get some court cases. They're funner anyway. An addendum. There is an addendum box and there's a counteroffer box. What do you use?
Counter till you get the meeting of new minds, and addendum is for everything else.
Okay, so I'm writing an offer and I want to addend. I want to put a bunch of stuff in this offer, and then they want to clarify something like the seller's names. Is that an addendum or is that a counteroffer? Because you made your offer, you put it all in there, really nice people, on your seller's name, okay? And they come back with, we just need to put in, you know, the Linda Hardman Trust. Seller's name should be known as Linda Hardman Trust. Is that a counteroffer or is that an addendum?
Just names.
Hmm?
Do you already have an executed contract?
I have a signed, executed contract I sent to you. You're just cleaning it up.
That's an addendum. That's a vote, I say. You're saying it's a counter.
I just made an offer to buy a house from really good people. You're changing their name. That's a counteroffer.
That's a counter. I was gonna say, so even after you have an executed contract,
Yeah.
so how I understood it is once you get to a meeting of the minds, everything's countering back to where you have a meeting of the minds, then anything beyond that is an addendum. And you were saying there are times past that point that it is a counter offer.
Okay, so a buyer's request for $10,000 in due diligence, after the due diligence, you already have a binding contract, which give me the right through due diligence to this date, 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, to accept or move on, right? Now I'm making a request of you to change the terms that you've previously agreed to. Is that an addendum or is that a counteroffer?
Like it's a counter.
That's a counter.
So, yeah. So then what would constitute an addendum?
Clarifications, in response to addendum number 4, buyer and seller agree that those items of personal property that were discussed on Saturday night are as follows.
That would be an addendum.
Right.
So we're actually misusing addendum more often than not.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Some of these contracts, though, we're getting, you know, you guys are on addendum number 41. I'm like going, oh my God, pick up the phone. You know what I mean? Work out some of these details. It's crazy.
Okay, so then how does that leave us all with? That detail right there, obviously you like a tight contract. Is there what could go wrong? Where does shit hit the fan in addendum?
Well, if you get a decent attorney, you basically are making it cloudy on whether or not there was ever a true meeting of the minds, or if there was a binding contract with the persons that have to be bound. You know, I mean, so Linda Hardman accept this, you know, whatever, but the actual owner is Linda Hardman Trust. And so is she signing a Linda Hardman trustee of the Linda Hardman Trust? And if she didn't, is she outside her scope? Because I don't even know if she has all the ownership rights of what's in the Linda Hardman Trust, or if it might be Melanie, or, you know, I mean, I don't know. So does she even have the authority to bind? You know what I mean? And so accuracy is pretty important, okay? Seller's notice of cancellation. What rights does the seller have to cancel? Nada. I mean, unless there's a specific addenda which they agreed to, for example, a short sale. You guys haven't lived through that world yet, but oh, it's a good time. Financing condition. If the buyer's not qualified by a certain amount of time, they've made their offer subject to financing, the seller can come back in and say, if you're not qualified by this date, we want the right to cancel. A time clause, which gives the buyer the right, I mean, all of those things. Unless there's something specific, this contract is binding on the seller. The buyer is out spending his money to make sure the house qualifies, he qualifies, and all that kind of stuff. And he shouldn't be putting his money at risk if the seller can pull the rug out from underneath him. And so it's binding on the seller, okay? A lot of times, and we've got another one of these, Friday was an active day. On Friday, we had one that actually canceled due to buyer default. They went past their settlement deadline. And it says buyer has until this, and seller may, doesn't say shall, but may. So the seller sent us a cancellation of contract. Somebody has to shoot the horse due to buyer default. And it shows as liquidated damages, option A. Option A is earnest money as liquidated damages. B is sue for specific performance, but if the buyer could buy, he probably would have, so that was kind of a dumb one. Or sue for actual damages. We have an actual damage claim going right now against some sellers who we're kind of thinking the buyer's agent was in cahoots. That's an old term, just wanted to throw that in there so y'all knew I'm old. But he kept stringing our sellers along to the point they quit their jobs, they moved, and were all the way almost to North Carolina when he called up and said, oh, by the way, if we don't get an extra $30,000 off the price, we're going to cancel based on financing. And so our agents, you know, kicked in some money and they took back some other things and they worked it out to where it was okay. Well, he saw that that one worked. So then he says, oh, and we want this and this and this, and took it to the point where it just seemed blatant. And their $5,000 earnest money won't even come close to covering the truck that they hired to haul their stuff out there, much less the $20,000 earnest money they're losing on the house that they were going to move to. Yeah, and there's actual damages are far in excess. But
Okay, so I have a client that signed a contract with a wholesaler, and they're like, oh, no, you didn't know. I was like, oh, black market real estate, you're getting awesome. So she didn't want to go through the traditional lunch, just get it done prior to end the road, right? So then she sees the ad that he's trying to assign a contract for $35,000 more than he's willing to pay her, and she's like, this is predatory. I would just love to pay $5,000 to make you go away. And I'm like, sorry, that's
not your choice.
yeah, and I said, so I've always been told earnest money times 2 is typical liquidated damage, but that's not contractual. Like, where does this speak come from?
I like to explain to both buyer and seller the purpose of earnest money to start with, okay? More earnest money is not necessarily a benefit to the seller. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, if the seller gets hit by a car and his estate can't close, buyer has the right to accept an amount equal to this earnest money as damages for the seller default. So these guys that come in here saying, you know, I'll give you $100,000 and here it is in the form of earnest money. Well, no, I'm going to counter it with something reasonable on the thing.
So then she said, so can I give him $10,000 to go away, $5,000 too? Like, don't do so either.
Well, you can, if buyer and seller agree to it, you can do anything.
Right? He actually was mine, he was the wholesaler, but it is his deadline to transact, his settlement deadline. Like, if he asks for an extension there, that's the only.
Yeah, you wait for that window and then say no.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I say, usually what goes around comes around type thing, you know?
She legit, and that's what I said, that when you're unrepresented, nobody told you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, and let's talk unrepresented buyers. We have an unrepresented buyer agreement, which basically says you're making the choice to represent yourself. You're not going to have agency. I'm not going to be working for you. I work on behalf of the seller and all that kind of thing. The Division of Real Estate looks at you as licensees. You know things in a real estate contract that this uneducated person might not know. So they don't know what they don't know. So we need to warn them on things that might be important to them in case they are important to them. So even though we have an unrepresented buyer agreement, we also have the for your protection. You might want to get a home inspection. The buyer's due diligence checklist. Don't be sending things out by wire. You know, so we're still, those aren't because we are counseling somebody. Those are because those are basic things that the Division of Real Estate wants us to tell people who might not know what they don't know, okay? I'm not counseling them. I'm not saying, hey, you might want to get a home inspection. There's a breach of fiduciary to my seller. I'm literally making the buyer know that he has a right to this thing, which if anything, makes my contract for my seller more solid. Okay, and so that's the kind of stuff that we're doing, okay? Buyer's notice cancellation. This sucker has whens, not whys. Whens, not whys. First option is prior to the due diligence deadline. Does not say for due diligence reasons. It does not say whatever. It says prior to the due diligence deadline, buyer cancels. Second option is after due diligence, prior to financing appraisal. Theoretically, those two are the exact same thing, okay? I've said it before, Lodestone Marketing versus Clark was an appellate court decision in Utah that basically said if the buyer has any right to cancel, they don't even need to tell the seller why, they just need to provide the notice by the time limit they have, whatever, okay? The next one, if it's after your financing appraisal, now it becomes a why issue. If the appraisal came in low, for example, it has provisions in the contract if the appraisal comes in low. If the buyer gets turned down for their loan after, there are provisions in the contract that limits the seller's receipt of damages to the earnest money. Okay? Yeah. So it says buyer and seller acknowledge that if it gets turned down after the financing appraisal deadline, since damages are difficult to calculate, buyer and seller agree that seller will receive as liquidated damages the earnest money, period. And so what you have is a lot of people default on transactions and then try to blame it on the appraisal or try to blame it on the financing appraisal. And that could be an argument thing, okay? We cool on any of that stuff? Again, it comes back down to what else could it mean? Okay, literally, what else could it mean? Oh, thank you. Well, I was actually going to throw that. I was going to make a point. I call up one of my attorney buddies and I said, hey, I'm going to be talking to some very cool people. Can you send me current court things that involve real estate agents? And he goes, how many do you want? Just a handful. He goes, yeah. forwarded them to me from his phone. These are just the ones that are active in his office, like right this minute, okay? He said that, and any good attorney is going to name everybody that touches a transaction in any lawsuit they're in, and then reserve John Doe's 1 through 5 million, and so they can add other people as they do discovery and they find some things out. But these are ones that are current on here, and I'm not going to show you because they actually have the names. But these are all here in Utah. This one makes you proud to be a real estate agent. Contacted this elderly lady who was in the process of winding down her affairs, wanted to build a house as a legacy for her family after she was gone. 79-year-old widowed woman with multiple medical conditions, okay? Contacts an agent and says, I have this property up by the lake. Do you know of any builders? And so he puts her in contact with this builder, and they agreed to a $650,000 contract price, okay? She thought that was a screaming deal, and it was. And I've got written right up here, too good to be true. If something's too good to be true, probably is. Question everything, okay? The reason this one ended up in court, it was supposed to have been done by December 31st of whatever year this was actually happened. It's not done. She's already paid $564,000. It's nowhere near close to being done. And so she filed suit against the builder, and during the discovery found out that the builder is an LLC that is owned by her real estate agent that was not disclosed. So we've got breach of fiduciary duty, we've got undisclosed disclosure of interest. The lender that has been dragging things along, the construction loan people that have been giving him draws when he's got his real estate or his construction hat on, is actually his brother-in-law. And so now they are wrapping it all together, and they're going after a RICO suit. They've done this to other people. They are basically a gang that is picking apart vulnerable people, right? Makes you proud to be, okay? From my standpoint, what could we have done differently if we were an agent in this thing? Question everything. Number one, like I said, if it's too good to be true, ask some questions about the builder. You know, ABC LLC doesn't tell me how many homes you built, what quality, how many complaints you've got, where's your contractor's license, which had been revoked. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So the problem here is the agent that she should have hired, one of you, would have checked it out and found out that stuff, but the agent she hired was actually involved in it, okay? So he's probably gonna do the same thing unless they get him criminal to where he goes to jail. She'll probably win a judgment, he'll file banco, and she's still out with $564,000, okay? So, you know, 79 medical histories. Similar one, and a lot of these have new construction veins in them, but this is too many hats in a transaction. Once again, we've got an agent builder doing a bait and switch where you will get all of these nice little perks on the construction of the house if you agree up front to have solar put on. And here's the solar rep, and you get some lender incentives if you use this lender while working with that solar rep, and we'll build this house for you with the solar that conforms with them, and did all of this kind of stuff. They are all one family. Again, the gangs. This is not in Salt Lake County. This one is This one's up north. So once again, they're saying cost plus on the construction of the house. They used a builder contract that nobody read through real carefully, which gave all of the control to the builder and none of the control to the buyer. But the buyer was on the construction loan and builder had the purse strings and was just writing themselves checks. At the time this lawsuit was filed and he was served, he happened to be on a safari in Africa. So their money's gone and he has something for his mantle. This one I particularly like, and I'm keeping this one specifically up here because this is in Salt Lake County and it is a name that many of us would know, so I'm keeping that over here. And it's also a company that many of us would know. There was competition for a listing. There's a very cool piece of ground up in a recreational area, and somebody was going to build a professional retreat for like conventions and like, what's the word I'm looking for? Hideaway? Yeah, retreat. That they could rent out and everything. And so, owner of the property spent tens of thousands of dollars with architectural crews planning this thing and getting his permits done and all of this stuff, and then just couldn't see it to the end because he was running out of money. And so he decided he was going to sell it. And so he interviewed agents. His requirements for agents, he very publicly said, he wanted somebody that was experienced in the sale of high-end resort-type properties, wanted a physical location in Salt Lake and in Park City, wanted extreme proficiency in marketing efforts, and this guy came in as a salesperson and sold him. Salesperson. Lips are moving. What does that mean? Okay. Yeah, so he came in and sold him a bill of goods. And immediately upon listing the property and getting it signed, he tells the client that, hey, I think rather than listing this thing for $7 million, I think it was, you know, we could turn it quick and get you out of your monetary thing, and you know, I could sell it all day long for $1.5 million. And he goes, I'm not gonna do $1.5 million. That's not even gonna cover my costs. No, I want to, you know, let's keep on this game plan. Agent listed across the MLS at the buy as is, unimproved, lots of plans available for additional money, and did it at the $1.5 million. When he did that, and the guy found out about it and went completely ballistic, and that he then is arguing that that little move devalued his property because people that he was hoping would pay $6.5 million now knew that his bottom line was in the $1.5 million. And so there's breach of fiduciary duty. There's all of the marketing materials this guy actually did himself and printed himself. This company does not have an office in Park City, which was a lie, but he can use one. He's got some friends that work up there. Lacked experience and expertise in dealing with high-end properties. In fact, had never sold a home over $410,000. Strategy employed by this gentleman as both a lot and a finished product created significant confusion and ultimately negative. But once again, it started with a conversation where this guy said, no, this is what I want you to do, and he did it his way anyway. And that is loyalty on that breach of fiduciary duties that we were talking about earlier. I'm supposed to follow any lawful instructions from my client. This one is another disclosure of interest. You know, it seems like these bad guys are not just telling everybody everything. If you tell everybody everything, let them make a decision on it, you get the business, great, you're good business. If you tell everybody everything and they don't want to do business with you, you probably are safer than not telling them and letting them do business with you, because this is another disclosure of interest where everybody and their brother, from the inspector to the appraiser to the real estate agent and the broker and the lender and the everybody picked this guy apart. And they're suing for $3.5 million, which they say is actual damages for money that they did. And it was on a buy, sell, flip. We'll take this property and we'll turn it into our flippers, and then we'll guarantee you at the other end this is going to happen. And just everybody. And until the lawsuit, they didn't find out. I used to own a company called Proactive Properties. And Proactive Properties was the real estate sales end of things, and that's what I was involved in. My brother, he was like my little brother. He sold a property management account, and they needed property management help at a discount. And so we suddenly got into the property management business, and we hired a property management that knew what the heck he was doing, and suddenly we were growing leaps and bounds, and we had several thousand properties that we're managing and all that kind of thing. And then, you know, a lot of those need maintenance. So then we had a maintenance arm, and we hired people in the maintenance end of things. And we noticed that a lot of the properties that we're managing were in condominiums. And so what the heck, let's get into the association management business, which we did. And a lot of those needed amenities. And so now we were building playgrounds and I mean, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, on September 11th, 2001, that September 11th, all of a sudden I was getting calls as I was trying to watch TV. I was getting calls from people that were saying, hey, I can't get my car out of the parking garage. And my maintenance people were calling up and saying, my check bounced. And I'm like, I want to watch what's going on in New York, you know, and all this kind of stuff. Well, they used that as the diversion to pick us apart. Our property manager that I didn't know knew anybody was actually the fiance of the one that was designing playgrounds for us. The accountant that was running all of our was actually his mother. His brother-in-law was our association management people. They literally came in and ran the scam for almost 2.5 years. I had no clue. Bad guys are really good at being bad. These guys aren't. You know, I mean, that was way too easy. As soon as it starts getting ugly and everybody's saying, you mean my brother? You know, gigs up. And then a last one is also here in Salt Lake. And breach of fiduciary duty, disclosure of interest. Can you buy your own listing?
Yes, we have to disclose.
Disclose? No.
No.
You cannot buy your own listing. Your fiduciary duty is to represent the best interest of your client above all others. Can't be accomplished if you are the all others. You can't buy, you can't. We've got some people right now talking about it, pardon me?
This needs to happen before an exclusive right to sell designated agency.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so I've got a listing and we go over and we're marketing the property and it's not happening. These people are starting to get desperate and they tell me, geez, we'd take 100,000 a day if we could get something. And I'm like going, dang, that's it, you know.
Right,
Okay.
so it has to be canceled, right?
Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let me explain something to you. I represent your best interest above all others, and you just told me something that as a real estate investor, that your property would be interesting to me. However, you told me that as your agent, and I'm not going to jeopardize that at all. If you would consider me being a buyer for your property, I'd like to resign as your agent and give you an opportunity to find another agent to represent your interests. If you're not comfortable with that, then I will take your property off of my potential property list and we'll go forward and find you the buyer, but it's your call. Sign here. You know what I mean? These guys are literally going to closing, representing the best interest of the buyer when they are the sellers, they are the builders, they are the lenders, they are, you know, and it ends up into a 64-page complaint. And at this point, somebody's already spent $10,000 to $12,000 to $15,000. There's no turning back, okay? And I'm just finishing up one that my fee, and mine's a little teeny slice, but my fee by the hour is probably $70. You know, this is, it's going and going and going. And E&O, it basically says that, you know, you're protected for errors and omissions if you're doing things legally. All they have to do is prove that that was not done legally, or with RICO, there was the intent. Their E&O company is going to say, you're on your own. And that's going to take some people down, and it's probably going to send a couple of them to jail. And, you know, this one that I was talking about out here, these people closed 70-something townhouse condominiums and representing the seller. And they get down to the last five of them, excuse me, and said, hey, for everything that we did on the construction end of this thing, we'll just take those last 5 units free and clear as our pay. And the seller goes, I'm not gonna pay you, it's, you know, they're $450,000 a piece. I'm not giving you $3 million for what you did over there. Well, and that's kind of what started the battle. So not only were they paid commissions for 70-something transactions, they wanted another $3 million for something that they had no written agreement to do, okay? Well, they had the keys, so they leased them out. They actually sold a couple of them on contract in the leases, giving these tenants rights of first refusal on these properties. They collected the rents and all this kind of stuff, so now not only have they clouded his title, okay, they're now keeping the rents. They're doing all of that outside of their brokerages. Now they're violating division licensing law, okay? He turned around and said, look, they were nice guys and stuff. I'll give them $1.8 million, but I'm not gonna pay them $3 million. They turned down the $1.8 million to make it all go away and are going after him. He's never signed a purchase contract. So 70-something transactions, they were forging his signature. In deposition, I'm sitting there going, well, was this one? And he's going, yeah, I don't know. I go, you said you signed, is this one that you signed his name to? Because they're not signing it like John Doe by Dave Fredrickson, they're signing it John Doe. And they're saying, well, is this one that you signed his name to, or is this one that he signed? And they're going, I really don't know. I was getting pretty good at his signature. I'm like, really? How dumb can you be? Don't be dumb. Ask yourself, what if? Ask yourself, what else could it mean? And call me, okay? That's an easy one, isn't it? Well, I went 15 long, and I'm sorry. But I stalled 15 at the beginning. We had to wait for, you know, well, I don't,
That's why we need those stay out of general classes, right?
what's that?